Hello, and welcome to Healthy California podcast. My name is Linda Brown, and I am the host of Healthy California, where my goal is to help educate you on your daily choices so we all can become healthy. I believe you, your family, your neighbor, and your community are all looking for better ways and simple ways to return to being healthy. Many of you have health issues or have family that's going through tough times that seemingly have no answers. It's frustrating. There are questions about health, environment, foods, exercise, and lifestyle, and it can be all overwhelming. And who do you believe? And where's the science behind it? This podcast will unravel the mystery behind being unhealthy and talk about little things that we can do in our lives to make a positive change in our health from all angles. So to be healthy, we need to have physical health, mental health, environmental health, financial and social health, and of course, spiritual health. Let's answer some of these questions to get healthy. What good is just listening to a podcast? I will give you resources as well, ways to take steps and make positive changes in your life to becoming healthy. This is a journey, not an assignment, so be kind to yourself. Okay, welcome back, California. Thank you for joining me this week. This week we are talking about hormones. We are going to divide it into men's hormones and women's hormones. But hormones in general, we'll talk about what hormones are, and then we'll talk about men's hormones today. And then stay tuned for next week when we'll talk about women's hormones. So what are hormones? Hormones are chemicals made in our body that then travels throughout our blood to different parts of our body. So they're made typically by glands, not always, glands, organs, and they are secreted into our blood, and then our blood carries it throughout our body. There are many different types of hormones. When we think of hormones, usually we think of reproductive hormones like estrogen or testosterone, or even maybe growth hormones. However, hormones regulate energy or metabolism, reproduction, growth, mood, and then hormones keep us in homeostasis or balance. Homeostasis means balance. Hormones keep us in homeostasis. We have different hormones like insulin and glucagon. That's an example of homeostasis. So insulin decreases our blood sugar, and if the blood sugar gets too low, then we have the glucagon to raise that blood sugar back up. Hormones are often a negative feedback system. Also, hormones can be regulated by, if too much hormone is made, then our body will detect there's too much, then it'll just stop making it. And in other ways, hormones are on a negative feedback system where if a hormone gets too high, another hormone will decrease it. So that's insulin. So insulin regulates our blood sugar and fuel for our body. Cortisol. Cortisol is our stress hormone. We have oxytocin. Oxytocin is a hormone. It's our love hormone or bonding hormone between mother and infant as well. We have hormones that tell us when we're dehydrated, and then at that point will make us thirsty. So that's like our antidiuretic hormone. We have hormones that regulate our sodium and water balance. We have hormones that regulate our calcium and phosphate balance, to keep our bones strong. We have hormones that regulate our menstrual cycle or releases milk. We have hormones that, like melatonin. Melatonin helps us to fall asleep. Doesn't help us to stay asleep, but it helps us to fall asleep. So that's melatonin. There's many different types of hormones, and I'm just going to go over a few. But why is this important? Why are we talking about hormones? Well, hormones are released by glands, like the pancreas or the thyroid. They're released by the brain, or like the pituitary gland in the brain. Hormones are released by the heart, the liver. We have hormones that are released by the adipose tissue. And what happens when those parts of your body aren't healthy? So what happens if the hormone that's released by the liver and the liver's not healthy? Or you have hormones released by adipose tissue and you have too much adipose tissue or too little adipose tissue? What happens when your pancreas or your thyroid isn't healthy? Then what happens to those hormones? So it's really important to talk about hormones because we have to figure out how to keep those glands healthy so that we can release healthy hormones. And no hormone works independently. If one hormone is off, then a whole cascade of hormones are going to be thrown off. Even just simple like decreased sleep can throw off a whole cascade of other hormones to be off. For example, decreased melatonin. We know that melatonin is our sleep hormone. So when we have decreased melatonin, like we're not sleeping or we can't fall asleep, that's going to increase our cortisol, which with increased cortisol is going to increase our blood sugar. With increased blood sugar, we're going to gain weight. And in addition to that, with increased blood sugar, we're going to increase our insulin levels. And with increased insulin levels, we also lose sleep. Well, really, with decreased melatonin, we lose sleep. And then it's that sleep, that decreased sleep is going to lead to inflammation. It's going to lead to weight gain. It's just this whole vicious cycle just by having decreased melatonin. Another example would be like your thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyroid stimulating hormone is a hormone released by the pituitary gland in the brain. And if your brain's not healthy, then what's happening with your thyroid? Your thyroid's going to be affected because your thyroid stimulating hormone isn't going to be able to stimulate it. And then we have things like decreased testosterone, decreased estrogen. Those are all going to be thrown off. And if Genesis says be fruitful and multiply, how are we going to do that if our hormones are all off? But what about if we had liver disease? In my program last month, I was advertising a liver detox. And the liver is really important for filtering things out. It's one of our main filters of our body. But what if your liver is not healthy? Well, the liver also secretes hormones. So if your liver's not healthy, your hormones aren't going to be healthy. For example, liver disease can lead to an increase of sex hormone binding globulin. If you have all this binding globulin, sex hormone binding globulin, then that's going to bind onto that testosterone, and you're not going to have free testosterone. So that's another example to keep your liver healthy, because if your liver's healthy, your testosterone is going to be healthy. What are the causes and how does this affect you? Well, this week we're going to talk about men's hormones, just main hormones, not every single hormone. We would be here forever if that were the case, but we're going to talk about the main ones. And then next week we'll talk about women's hormones. We're going to talk about insulin, cortisol, melatonin, estrogen, and testosterone. And all this applies because it all affects testosterone. And these are just the main ones that affect testosterone. Let's talk about insulin. Increased insulin. Increased insulin leads to insulin resistance. So what is insulin? First of all, what is insulin? Insulin is a hormone that decreases our blood sugar. And it does that by the hormone attaching to a receptor on pretty much every cell of your body. And because every cell needs energy. So the blood sugar, because of the insulin, is going to go into the cell, and the cell is going to be able to have energy. So that's what insulin does. It decreases our blood sugar by taking the sugar into our cell. But if we have too much blood sugar, then increased insulin will lead to insulin resistance, which is a vicious cycle, because when we have increased blood sugar, we're going to increase our insulin to get rid of that blood sugar. And then we develop insulin resistance. So we have even more blood sugar because the blood sugar is not going into the cell. And so we increase our insulin more, but then we can't take the blood sugar into the cell. So then our blood sugar keeps going up and our insulin keeps going up because of the insulin resistance due to having chronically high blood sugar. So when you get your blood sugar tested by your doctor, that's only half the story. It's only half the picture. You really need to be getting insulin levels checked as well. And your doctor knows this, but sometimes insurance pays for it and sometimes it doesn't. Either way, you need to test your insulin in addition to your blood glucose levels. And here's the reason why. When you have increased blood sugar, your insulin goes up to bring your blood sugar down, right? Well, what if your blood sugar looks completely normal because you have so much insulin going through your body? It's going to make your blood sugar look good because your insulin levels are way out there. And that's because your pancreas is working overtime to secrete all this insulin. And when that happens, that's when you develop insulin resistance, and eventually it's going to lead to diabetes. So you need to check to see if your insulin isn't high, trying to keep up with the demands of your blood sugar. So you need to check your insulin levels, and it needs to be below 6. The normal doctor report on the labs would be anywhere between 2 and 25. If your insulin levels are 25, you at that point you pretty much have diabetes. 25 is way too high. So it needs to be down below 6, and that's a fasting insulin level. So when the next time you get your blood sugar or blood glucose checked, have them do an insulin level as well, and the insulin needs to be down below 6. So when you have increased insulin or insulin resistance, that leads to metabolic diseases, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, diabetes, and weight gain. And then if you have the weight gain, you also have increased inflammatory markers. So you're going to have increased chronic inflammation. And then we know that chronic inflammation leads to most chronic diseases like heart disease and autoimmune disorders and hypertension, diabetes. Diabetes leads to inflammation. Inflammation leads to diabetes. It's a vicious cycle. So we need to control our insulin levels, and we need to do that. How do we do that? We'll talk about that later, but we know that we have to control our blood sugar. So insulin needs to be regulated, or it will lead to chronic diseases and weight gain. Increased weight will decrease testosterone production. So increased weight will decrease testosterone production. That's why we need to decrease our insulin. We need to decrease our weight if you want to have normal testosterone levels. So let's talk about cortisol. What is cortisol? Cortisol is our stress hormone. And these days, we typically have increased cortisol, not decreased cortisol. So with increased cortisol, that means that you are stressed. But with increased cortisol, think about the stress. The stress is you are running from a tiger. So when you're running from a tiger, your body's going to dump sugar into your blood so that you have enough energy to run from this tiger. Well, in today's world, there is no tiger. There's traffic, there's deadlines, there's work, there's stressed out people at work. So we have increased cortisol for other reasons, but it still dumps blood sugar into our blood, and then we don't use that blood sugar, so that it stores in our adipose tissue as fat. Increased cortisol is going to increase our blood sugar, which is going to increase our fat. Increased cortisol also, in addition to increased fat, it can lead to hypertension, it can lead to fatigue and weakness, you can have mood changes, sleep disturbances, because cortisol ebbs and flows through the night as well. So you can have sleep disturbances, you can have a weakened immune system. So stress is going to weaken your immune system. You're going to get sick. If you're stressed, you're going to get sick more often. You're going to have skin issues. You can have blood sugar imbalances. Well, we know that because increased cortisol is going to increase our blood sugar. Because of that, increased cortisol is going to decrease testosterone levels. And for a couple different reasons. It's going to decrease testosterone because increased cortisol is going to make us stress, which is going to increase our inflammation, which is going to decrease our testosterone, the testosterone levels, but also the production of it, not just the levels of it, but the production of it. So we need to reduce our stress. And then another hormone, melatonin. What is melatonin? Melatonin is our sleep hormone. Melatonin is going to help us fall asleep. If we have low melatonin, we're going to have difficulty falling asleep. We're going to have poor sleep quality. We're going to have fatigue during the day and low energy. And then when that happens, of course, we grab for the caffeine. We drink caffeine mid-afternoon. It keeps us awake. And it goes into this vicious cycle of not being able to fall asleep, getting tired in the afternoon, drinking the coffee. So decreased melatonin is going to get you down that rabbit hole. You're going to have mood disturbances, weakened immune system again. So melatonin is actually a pretty strong antioxidant. It's one of our oldest hormones. And with that low antioxidant, melatonin hormone, it's going to weaken our immune system. So again, we're going to get sick more often. But we're also, if we're not sleeping, we're also going to get sick more often. So that's kind of a double whammy. And then so decreased melatonin also lead to hormonal imbalances. because testosterone is secreted at night while we're sleeping, and if we're not sleeping, we're not secreting the testosterone. So you're going to have a hormonal imbalance. So decreased melatonin is going to decrease your testosterone levels. So you need to have a good bedtime habit. You need to get 6 to 8 hours worth of sleep, 7 to 8 hours really, and have a good sleep hygiene. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then another hormone, estrogen. Why are we talking about estrogen if we're talking about male hormones? Well, males have estrogen as well. And more recently, males are increasing their estrogen levels. So increased estrogen levels in men are going to increase their infertility. So they're going to be shooting blanks. It leads to increased estrogen leads to gynecomastia, that is male boobs. Increased estrogen is going to lead to erectile dysfunction, mood changes, fatigue, weight gain, loss of muscle mass, and increased risk of cancer. So increased estrogen is going to decrease muscle mass, and it's going to lead to weight gain. Well, weight gain, and when I say weight gain, I really mean fat. I'm not talking about weight as far as muscle. So it's going to increase your fat, and fat in your body produces estrogen. So the more fat you have on you, the more estrogen. And in males, at a certain point, you have this compound in your body, and it's going to decide if it's going to make estrogen or testosterone. And in the presence of increased fat, that compound will go towards estrogen. So instead of having testosterone produced, you're going to have estrogen produced. So in a male, you're going to have estrogen production instead of testosterone production. So that's another reason to lose fat from your body, is that increased estrogen. So increased estrogen leads to decreased testosterone production. And then finally, let's talk about testosterone. Males are always wanting to figure out why they have the low T. And I think it's just because it's always on the TV channels, the commercials, low T, low T, low T. So let's talk about low T, low testosterone. Low testosterone is going to decrease energy levels. It's going to decrease muscle mass. It's going to increase fat. So low testosterone is going to increase your fat. It's going to decrease libido. Low testosterone will cause erectile dysfunction, mood changes like depression, anxiety, and irritability. Low testosterone is going to decrease mental focus. It's going to increase osteoporosis. Yeah, so low testosterone can increase osteoporosis. It's going to create sleep disturbances. It can cause hair loss, impaired memory, impaired self-confidence. It's going to decrease morning erections, which morning erections is normal. It should be normal. And decreased testosterone is going to decrease sexual performance. And here's a fun fact. I don't know if it's fun or not, but here's a fact. Increased estrogen is the main trigger for BPH, not testosterone. So increased estrogen is the main trigger for benign prostatic hypertrophy. So again, increased estrogen. So increased estrogen can come from having more fat on your body. Those are the main hormones that we've already discussed. Insulin, cortisol, melatonin, estrogen, and testosterone. So then what do you do about it? What do you do about your hormones if they're all out of whack? What do I always mention? Diet and exercise. So exercise, strength training, heavy lifting increases testosterone. Heavy lifting, strength training increases testosterone. You need to lift heavy. But you could also do high intensity interval training. There's intervals where you don't have to lift for an hour. You just do these intervals of heavy lifting. So strength training needs to be part of your regimen if you're going to increase your testosterone. But endurance training, cardio exercise, endurance training decreases fat. And so if you decrease your fat, you're more likely to convert to testosterone instead of estrogen. Endurance training or cardio, I'll just call it cardio. Cardio helps with your mood. Cardio helps with fatigue. Cardio reduces the risk of cancers and decreases hypertension and cardiovascular disease, because cardio and actually increased muscle mass as well are anti-inflammatory. So they release anti-inflammatory myokines, which then decrease inflammation. and then you are reducing all those risks of your chronic inflammatory diseases. So you need to do both. You need to do strength training to increase your testosterone, but you also need to do cardio to decrease your fat and help with your mood, help with your fatigue, reduce inflammation. So that's exercise. You're not going to get away with it. You're not going to get away with not doing it. It's always going to be on every podcast that I talk about if I'm talking about health. And then let's talk about diet. And when I talk about diet, I'm only talking about a healthy diet. Your diet to increase your testosterone would be healthy fats. Healthy fats in the form of nuts, avocados, olive oils. So you want to increase your healthy fats. You want to increase your fiber. And when I talk about fiber, I would love it if you could increase your fiber in the form of nice, colorful, eat the rainbow type of fruits and vegetables. So high fiber diets. And it's also going to decrease inflammation. I want to take a second to share a helpful resource with you. I have a free health questionnaire designed to pinpoint the areas in your life that you need to focus on for optimal wellness. If you're interested, simply click the link in the show notes or visit heal-throughfood.com to access it. Now let's dive back into the show. You can eat protein-rich foods to maintain your muscle mass. And also zinc and vitamin D are needed for testosterone, for the testosterone production. So if you're eating a healthy diet, then you're probably going to get enough zinc in there. But vitamin D is made from the sun. So you need to get into the sun and or supplement. We talked about sunscreen last week and how vitamin D is made from exposure to the sun. And if you're not going to expose yourself to the sun for reasons of cancer risk, then supplement with vitamin D. And then let's talk about sleep. So we know that sleep is important for healing, but it is also important because that is when testosterone is secreted into the body. So poor sleep leads to decreased testosterone levels, and we need to have good sleep hygiene. So good sleep hygiene would be going to bed at the same time every night. It would be sleeping 7 to 8 hours, no screen time, decrease your caffeine intake, don't watch scary movies or things on TV that are going to get you all riled up. And that includes even reading a book. If you're reading a really, really good book, it could get your mind going and then not be able to sleep. Blackout shades if you are sensitive to light, decreasing noise, keeping your room cool, all those things are going to help with your sleep. So that's good sleep hygiene. And I have a podcast on sleep as well. You can go look it up. And then you want to manage stress because cortisol is our stress hormone. So you want to manage stress to decrease that cortisol level. Stress increases cortisol, which decreases testosterone. And you can manage stress by doing breathing exercises. You can take a yoga class. Exercise will decrease your stress. Even drinking a nice good cup of stress-reducing tea. But the main part of stress is prioritizing your schedule. We fill up our schedule too much. It's not good to have a schedule as busy as we do. So we need to prioritize what is important. Because literally it's going to, if you're living high stress all the time, it's literally going to kill you. So let's figure out what's important and prioritize some other stuff off. You don't always have to be a yes person. It's okay to say no to certain things and get used to saying no. You don't always have to be a yes person. What else? So opioids. Opioids reduce testosterone. I'd like to say that pain meds decrease testosterone, although I can't find any research on that. I'm going to say it, but I can't find any research on it. But opioids, yes, there's research saying opioids reduce testosterone. And then finally, endocrine disruptors. Endocrine are hormones. So endocrine disruptors are anything in our environment that disrupts our ability to make hormones. So that includes phthalates, which are plasticizers. We find phthalates everywhere in our environment, including in our lotions and our creams. So phthalates, get rid of them. Look them up on the ingredients list. Phthalates are spelled PHTHALATES, phthalates. And then you have BPAs or bisphenols. BPAs are found on the linings of cans, including soda cans, receipt paper, I never take receipt paper. At the gas station, I always say no receipt. When someone tries to hand me a receipt, I say no, you can throw it away. I don't take receipt paper because if you take receipts, it's just filled with BPAs. If you take a receipt paper, you're taking it, you're handling it once, you're putting it in your purse or your wallet or your pocket, and then you have to take it back out to look at it, and then you have to throw it away. So that's 3 contacts with that receipt paper. And if you're not going to look at it, then why did you take it to begin with, right? So if you can avoid receipt paper, don't take the receipt paper. What else? Endocrine disruptors. Plastics. Plastics are everywhere. We consume 1 credit card worth of plastics every single week. So that's the reason why we are doing a liver cleanse. I advertised it last month, but this month of June, and for those of you who are joining me, we're doing a liver cleanse because we have plastics in our environment everywhere. So you got to get rid of the plastics. I don't drink out of plastic water bottles. I don't do single-use plastics. I try not to, right? As best I can. You can't avoid plastics these days. But you can do what you can. Do not warm up your food in a plastic container. All that plastic leaches into your food, and they are endocrine disruptors. They're going to mess with your hormones. PVC pipes. We have PVC pipes all throughout our house, and hot water running through them are going to bring plastics into your water. You know, what can you do about that, right? So filter it out. What else? Avoid canned foods, avoid canned beverages, because those have the BPAs lining it. And then there's meats, eggs, and milks. It's really important to get meats, eggs, milks, cheese, butter, whatever is animal-based product. Get them without hormones. So hormone-free animal products. They're in eggs, they're meats, milks, butters, cheeses. Get them all hormone-free and get them antibiotic-free if you can as well. And then other endocrine disruptors are anything scented. Anything scented. You know, it could be laundry sheets. It could be hand soaps. It could be those little spray things that keep your house smelling nice and fresh. Perfumes, body creams, body lotions. Anything that has a scent is scented with chemicals, and those chemicals are endocrine disruptors. I say this all the time. If you have a beautiful smelling orange scented body lotion, I can guarantee you that there are no oranges in that body lotion. They created that smell to smell beautiful, and it's chemicals. There are no oranges in your orange scented body lotion. I can guarantee you that. As best you can, get rid of anything scented if you are trying to keep your hormones regulated. And this week, we mostly mentioned men's hormones. Next week, we'll talk about women's hormones. A lot of the things to do about it are going to be the same, but we'll go over it again because I think it's really important. And that's it. Hormones. There's a lot to know. There's a lot that we can do about it. And I will talk to you guys next week. Stay healthy, California. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you learned something new. Health care and treatment should focus on being proactive and preventative, emphasizing the importance of addressing the root cause of a disease or illness. While the U.S. has an excellent trauma medicine system, helping patients when problems arise, our goals should be to prevent disease before they happen. That's why this podcast is so important to me. If you're needing further guidance or have questions on a particular matter, you can find my contact information in the show notes, where you can set up a 15-minute consultation. I also recommend you adding a functional nutritionist, a functional medicine practitioner, and a physical therapist to your healthcare team. This podcast reflects my personal opinions based on extensive research and education. It is not intended for medical diagnosis or treatment and should never replace the advice from your doctor or other healthcare professionals. To continue providing this free information, I rely on your support. Follow, subscribe, like, and share this podcast with your family and friends, or on social media. Don't forget to turn on your notifications to stay updated whenever I have a new episode released. Educating you and empowering you to take back your health is my ultimate goal. By gathering knowledge and implementing small but impactful changes, you can reclaim your well-being. This is a journey, not a quick fix, so be kind to yourself, and I'll be there to help. You got this.